Well, let's welcome Dr. Jain online, who is the Cole Secretary. Before he starts his lecture, let me present a brief biography of him to all of you. Dr. Anil Jain is IAS and Secretary of Ministry of Coal in Government of India. Prior to that, he served as a Special Secretary for Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Dr. Jain is IAS officer of 1986 batch from Madhya Pradesh cadre. He has more than 30 years of administrative experience in the field and in policy formulation levels in various ministries and departments in the state as well as central government. He has also served the Ministry of Petroleum, Natural Gas as Director and Joint Secretary. He was also involved with policy formulation and implementation on the upstream and downstream development of the gas sector in India. Dr. Jain holds a BA Honours in Economics, an MBA and a diploma from Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. He has published a number of papers and articles on energy sector, including a book on natural gas policy framework in India, published by Oxford University Press. He has been a visiting senior research fellow at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies at Oxford in United Kingdom. So with this, we welcome Dr. Anil Jain to deliver his lecture today. Dr. Jain, could you please share your screen?
Yeah, can you see me? I don't have a presentation.
Okay. Let me just put you, yeah, we can see you, and we can probably have you spotlight for everyone. Yeah. Yes, please.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, very well.
Good morning, friends. Director, IIT Kanpur, distinguished delegates and friends, it's a privilege speaking to such an august audience. Sorry I couldn't make it in person, so I do hope I'm able to communicate as I would have wished, had I been there in person. Today's topic is, quite a live one. India's sustainable future, challenges and opportunities vis-à-vis global perspectives. For the last, I think, since 2005, the issue of climate change and UNFCCC have been building up heat. And Paris COP, Glasgow Declaration, India's commitments, all of them have made global headlines. And then comes this Russia-Ukraine issue last year, and energy parameters across the world have suddenly changed. There are doubts on what the net zero pathways might take. Will there be a rethink? So it is against this background that this conference is being held, and multiple places people are thinking about it. So with this little background, let me come straight to the topic. I'm basically going to speak, my delivery to you is going to be in 4 parts. First and foremost, I'll share my views on what I would understand from the concept of energy security, which is the primary aim of all the economies to keep their citizens well supplied with energy. So energy security basically revolves around a framework of a trilemma. Availability, affordability and sustainability. So 3 of them are often seen in a pecking order, and sometimes they are seen as all 3 of them being important. So how does that engage India vis-à-vis other countries? The second pillar of my delivery would be the issue of energy mix, because energy is responsible for 75% of, let's say, India's carbon dioxide emissions. So what is an energy mix? Moving to clean energy, etc., is supposed to be the major lever to manage the subject of climate change. The third one would be coal. This is the elephant in the room. And coming, in my present assignment, maybe I can delve a little bit deeper into that. And lastly, the short-term and the long-term strategies, which probably India may chart going forward. So coming straight away to the energy security trilemma, as I mentioned that availability, affordability and sustainability have been, the framework in which any country's energy security, strategy has been addressed. And as we noticed that earlier, until maybe, the Russia-Ukraine war, when suddenly coal power plants suddenly started becoming active both in Germany and in US, and in the EU's energy strategy, gas was identified as green energy. So there seems to be some kind of a confusion on the pecking order between these three terms. And it appeared when the West gave the doctrine that fossil fuel is dirty and the energy strategy and the climate strategy is all about moving away from fossils. We suddenly see that availability has now become the foremost criteria. So whatever energy one can put together, is what is now the mantra. So much so that countries like Poland, which were exporters of coal, have themselves now become importers. So the reality has hit them hard. So though there is no scholarly work to my knowledge on what might be the weights of these three objectives of an energy strategy, but at least within India, availability has been the most important driver. And it is because of that reason that coal comprises almost 55% of the commercial primary energy mix and more than 70% of the electricity source for us. India's own domestic concerns, large population, poverty, very poor energy parameters, 1/3 of the global average energy consumption, both in electricity and in energy, and lack of critical minerals, we don't even have uranium enough supply. It impacts our choices. So basically what I wanted to convey was that in the trilemma, India's concern has largely been on availability, because availability links very closely with affordability. If you have your own energy supply, you can control the price without getting into whether it's good or bad, whether markets are good or not. All I want to say is that today natural gas spot prices are ruling at $50 a million BTU, when in India we were not able to afford even an $8 LNG supply. So if India has its own supply of energy, it makes things easier for us. I move on to the second pillar, which is the energy mix constraints of countries, and how does it vary across countries in the world, the OECD world, the developing world. To my mind, the availability factor coming from the first pillar has been the main driver of the energy mix that you get to see in countries. Well, Japan, Korea, some of these far eastern developed economies are a little different because they don't have any sources of energy within themselves. Japan needs to import coal, also it needs to import gas, it needs to import even uranium and oil. After the 1973 oil crisis, Japan took a conscious decision and cut down the share of oil and moved into, so it has the choices, and I'm not sure whether they're happy about it, that Japan doesn't have any natural resources and mineral resources related to energy. But across the world, if we see, on an average, natural gas, oil, coal, and clean energy as a bundle have all commanded roughly 25% each. As I mentioned that India's energy mix that way is quite skewed because we have oil, we have coal of about 55 to 56%, and about 26% to 27% being oil, and gas, which as a global average is about 25%, in India's case is a mere 6%. So this is something which Indian policymakers have perhaps overlooked, that while availability is a very important criteria, but for a competitive economy, you should have the flexibility in your energy system to be able to pick up that energy source, which is more competitive at a particular time, or for any other consideration like the present consideration is the carbon emission aspect. So India's energy mix, I made a study on this and used a metric called the Shannon-Wiener Diversity Index. Just like in a forest, you need to make sure that the different species are evenly spread out. Otherwise, if there was a pest attack, that forest would get totally wiped out. Similarly, an energy mix needs to have a happy blend. But in the case of India, the coal and the oil dimensions have been virtually static over the years. So this is for a separate discussion. But what comes out of this particular discussion, to my mind, is that the energy mixes are, at a global level, it may be evenly balanced. But for countries, there are country-specific circumstances. And in the case of India, the endowment of natural resources has been in such a way. We've done a lot of exploration for oil and gas, unfortunately, after 1974, when Bombay High was discovered. And the only major discovery which we may be happy for is in the early 2000s, when the KG Basin natural gas discovery took place. Otherwise, India has not had much of luck in oil and gas either. So moving on to the third pillar, since coal is the major elephant in the room, and that is what is India's mainstay of energy supply. How can we not about coal? 70% share in the total power generated coming from coal, and over the last 30 to 40 years, a very complex maze having been built around coal-based electricity supply. Even the regulatory setup which came up, the SERCs and the CRCs, were basically meant to facilitate, coal-based power and playing around it, charging the commercial and the industrial segments higher and subsidizing the poor and the agriculture with it. And then, the annual tariff revisions and keeping Coal India's notified price of coal to power static for the last 4 years, which only recently we have seen the entry of private sector into coal production. Otherwise, we were all happy that there was a public sector, Coal India Limited, supplying coal, steady prices, helping to keep the power prices static across the country. Well, I think now the government realizes that we have to gear up for a phase down or a phase out, whatever you might call it, of coal. It's inevitable. And it is in this context that this elaborate structure built around our electricity system needs to be revisited. What kind of a new regulatory setup which will we have? What kind of a new tariff structure which we will have? Because as you notice, even the renewables are today banking on the coal-based power. The free ride which renewable gets on our transmission systems and the blending of the low price of solar in the day and in the night time supported by coal. Now, as coal withdraws, whether this luxury will be available, and then the other aspects, macroeconomic aspects of our economy, where the freight burden, freight tariff of railways subsidizes the passenger traffic, and more than 50% of the coal freight, of the railway freight coming from coal, which is charged at an exorbitant rate. So all that will need to be re-engineered, re-evolved. So this is what I wanted to say, that coal in India has served our interests well, and I have a feeling that even in the energy transition agenda going forward, coal will have to play a major role, because coal might fuel, the coming in of hydrogen with the cheap power which it assures to the nation. And it is in this respect that I move to the short-term and the long-term strategy. You see, one thing which comes to my mind is that a lot of people, when they talk about energy transition, just focus on the energy mix and look at coal and how it needs to be phased down, etc. Not realizing that it is only a buoyant economy, it's only a developed economy which is able to make a transition and fund the entry of new fuels. If we talk of any country in the world, whether it is the US or it is the Europe or developed economies, they have not been able to move on to a new fuel until they were developed and they were able to fund it and finance it. So, to my mind, unless India can grow at 8 to 9% consistently for a decade or so, it will not be able to develop the surplus with which it has to fuel the energy transition. The electrification of the economy, meeting of the cooling needs, all of them have to be taken care of by a cheap source of energy. You cannot immediately move away from cheap sources of electricity, and for that matter, growth in the hard to abate sectors which India has. So the short-term strategy, to my mind, has to be coal-centric. Unless coal is a part of the energy transition agenda, if we look upon it as the devil, if we look upon it, how can it be cut to size, we will not be able to handle the energy transition agenda. So that is the short term, and of course, the long-term agenda, which I'm not talking of 50 years or 50 years, maybe I divide my short term and long term into 10 years and post 10 years, has to be phasing down of coal, which will bring in the elements of a just energy transition. With such a large mining sector and the 7 states of India depending on the coal economy and on the transportation, on the townships, on the royalty incomes, the fiscal income of the states as well as the local bodies dependent on coal mining, that is when we need to put in place a just energy transition, which is a vast topic in its own self, and it is that which will help India to probably progress towards the net zero strategy for 2070. So with that, I come to the last stage of my presentation. That there is no magic bullet. It's very difficult for any a COP where the entire world sits to come up with steps 1, 2, 3, 4 for the world to migrate to a net zero scenario. India's energy challenges are massive. I'm sure all of us agree that the rural young girl, a teenager who is often sent out to collect firewood, in spite of the entry of LPG into the kitchen, we all know that its affordability is still an issue, and even that teenager wants to go to school, wants to go to college, and ultimately find a job somewhere to do. So this backbreaking, fuel collection of primary fuels and cooling needs, we can't address we are sitting in a technical committee with IIT Kanpur here. We talk of cool roofs and we talk of building materials, etc. But ultimately, air conditioning is a must, and we have to keep in mind certain timeline. Maybe it is 2032, 2035, by which even rural areas must see the penetration of air conditioning, and all of that will happen only if cheap sources of energy are not only generated but also hauled over transmission lines by improving the transmission system and distributed as well through a very strong and robust sub-transmission and distribution network. So the per capita numbers with 1400 billion units are being generated for 1.2, 1.3 billion people, India cannot assume that energy transition is an easy task. And this will need a new set of regulators, as I said, new set of tariff infrastructure, but at the same time, it's not as if the hydrogen economy and the solar economy and the 450 to 500 gigawatts has to be postponed to that date. So India will move on parallel tracks, but with an important role for coal in it. So for the next couple of years, let us concentrate on a robust energy policy which can improve the energy parameters of India, and at the same time, keep it ready for the transition which will come across the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jain, for a very insightful lecture. Would you be able to take a couple of questions?
Yes, 5-10 minutes maybe, then I think.
No, it won't take 10 minutes. We'll just take a couple of questions if there are any. If there are any questions from the audience, anybody would like to ask anything? Okay, I think, there are no questions at the moment. Thank you very much for your insightful lecture. I know that you are a very busy man, but thanks really a lot for sparing your time and joining this event in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.